Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Today's guest is Matthew Boutte, also known as MEBO. He's an artist from Atlanta, Georgia, who just graduated from University of Michigan with a sound engineering degree. He is an awesome indie alternative R&B artist. He's the co-founder of OSSI, which is an independent artist collective up at University of Michigan, and we're excited to have him on the podcast today. Matthew, how you doing?
Hanging in there.
You're still in Atlanta, right?
Still in Atlanta, so we have one more month before I move out to LA. So we're just trying to live it up,
That's so exciting, man. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited too. It's gonna be a fun time.
You're gonna be working the same job, right?
Yeah, so I'll be doing acoustics consulting with Air up in the downtown LA office, but then I'll still be able to do music on the side. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome, dude. Very excited to have you out here. So you just graduated from UMich, right? With is it audio engineering degree?
Sound engineering, yeah.
Sound engineering.
So the major that is technically the long name for it would be performing arts technology, and there's different tracks or curriculum paths, and I did path D, which is the sound engineering one. So that's the only one that gives me a Bachelor of Science from the School of Music, but I also get an electrical engineering minor from it. And the diploma actually came in the mail like a month ago. So
That's so funny. It came in the mail.
Yeah, because we didn't have graduation.
Right.
So.
Well, congratulations, man. That's incredible. I wanted to ask you what you think about now that you've had that experience, obviously the normal college experience and getting a degree. For that specific degree, what would you say to somebody who is going to be like in your shoes? You know what I mean? Either they're going to start there or they are already in it. What would you say?
So the reason I chose the path I did, or the path I took, was because this particular degree program would allow me to understand the electrical aspects behind sound processing. And then also like in the digital domain, something we call DSP or digital signal processing. So being part of the curriculum as part of the stuff that we record and the music we produce, I also got to understand the technical background behind why those things work and why we do things a certain way. So for someone who is interested in understanding the ins and outs of how audio works and why a lot of the processes are built off of and I wouldn't say basic because they're pretty complex, but I guess like basic principles of electrical engineering. If you're interested in understanding why sound reacts that way in electric space, I think that is something that's really worthwhile, which is why I really love this degree program. It's not necessary. Like, you really don't need to know all that in order to produce music or record music. But I found that learning about those processes and learning about how those things worked, it's inspired me to work with audio in ways I probably wouldn't have before. So for someone who's interested in learning how audio works and understanding how it works in an electrical field and understanding how it works in the digital signal processing world and like how those things are created and those algorithms are used and developed, I really think that this degree program and going about that technical path is worthwhile. I don't know. I think the most important thing to do, especially if you're stuck, is to just like try different things out. Always tack whatever problem you're doing in a different angle than what you've done before if it's not working. Because I think audio, especially audio specific problems, can be solved in so many different ways, whether it's a technical approach or a non conceptual approach, like just a lot of different ways to tackle it. Which is why I think it's so cool, because you can't see audio unless you put it through like a spectrum analyzer or whatever. So you have to use your ears. So I think the most important thing is just to like trust your ears, but also just like, reapproach it in different ways, like any good engineer would.
That's so interesting. I've always thought about the idea that sound waves are just sound waves. And when you're looking at them on Logic, you might know in your head, like, oh, this isn't a snare. This is me doing some weird noise. But if you close your eyes and you just listen to it, something about just, forgetting what you're looking at can kind of help you come up with ideas that you you otherwise would not have come up with.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I've learned recently just through songwriting that a lot of my more organic ideas happen when I'm not looking at a computer screen. So I try to remove myself from the laptop or from the computer when I'm working on stuff. So like I've invested in much more like analog pieces of gear.
Really nice.
Like even just a guitar pedal board has already changed so many things, and just like having everything happen from in the box or in the computer.
Right.
So
When you record guitar now, are you mainly going through these pedals, which goes into your audio interface?
I do have my Black Star amp that I like to mic up every now and then. So like the song that I put out with M Camp back in, I guess was it March or April, something more. All that guitar is recorded through an amp. Um, so that's I still love the sound of that amp, and I think it sounds really good, especially through this mic, which is an AT4040. But now that I have an upgraded audio interface from, I got the UAD Apollo X4. The high Z inputs are so good that just running my pedal board through that and then using a virtual Marshall, I think it's a Jubilee Silver, the amp, it's a soft tube modeling one. It sounds really, really good as well. So it just depends on the tube. But typically, I don't run guitar direct in. I always go through the pedal board, um, because I have a compressor on there that's already compressing the signal before it hits it,
Mm-hmm.
and then I also have my drive pedal. So I have a JHS double barrel, which is like half Morning Glory, half Moonshine. So it has that nice kind of grit that's always on. And then I have all my modulation effects, like my vibrato, my phaser, my delay, and then I have the Strymon Big Sky reverb. So like I can do a lot through it, and because all, especially the Strymon and the Boss delay, they sound so clean because they're both digital pedals that I can put my synth through it. I can put my vocals through it. Like it gives me a lot of flexibility. Um, so I would say a lot of the stuff I'm doing is going through that if I'm going direct in.
Very nice. I think it takes a lot more love and care to run all of your effects through like the analog, the pedals, because it can be easy, especially with delay when you're producing on Logic or Ableton or whatever, to just do like, all right, quarter time or eighth time, and it's just gonna sound perfect. But to like really, one, if you've invested all this money in these pedals, you should really like learn how to use them, I think, with recording more than just for live, because it can do so many great things, especially something like the Big Sky that has, I mean, God
Uh,
knows how many setups.
I think there's like 12 different algorithms, but like there's like 300 save presets that they give you.
Jeez.
There's so many parameters you can adjust. Now I do like to use time-based effects. I do like to use VSTs just to have that precision, like you were talking about. Um, More when I'm trying to have it mix or sit in a track. But if I'm, like making a synth patch on, I have a Yamaha Reface CS, so like the small white keyboard. It sounds really great. Sounds in it. And there's some built-in effects to it, but it doesn't have a reverb. So sometimes just to have some sense of space, not necessarily one that I'm gonna have in a mix, but just to add some depth to it, that stereo through the Big Sky into the interface sounds really great. Um, so it's good to give it, I guess, a place for it to reside in, but it's not going to be its permanent home, I guess, once it's in the mix. Um, so just messing with that, and then always like, I mean, we were talking about this last time we saw each other using Sound Toys plugins, like that thing. Those plugins are in. That's on every mix at this point.
Nice. I wanted to ask you about your music and how, everything we're talking about with production. How do you think that your production style, sound has changed from Coping, which was your first song, right? And to Something More, which is the latest release, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like just between those four songs, I definitely feel like I've definitely grown as a mixing engineer. Um, it's funny. So for my thesis, I did a little EP that I haven't released yet because I've been working on different songs I want to replace on them, but that should be coming out sometime by the end of the year. But I turned the EP in with 5 new songs, and then Coping is my last song to my teacher just to see how he would judge the mix for it. Like I knew it wasn't. I knew Coping as much as I enjoyed a song and I'm proud of it. The mixing compared to what I'm doing now is just subpar. Um, and my thesis teacher said like this is the worst mix on the track, like on the EP. Like I don't know what you're doing.
Damn.
Uh, by far the roughest mix, and it's true. Like and that's only been, and that was like a year and a half after I made Coping. So for him to hear that much of a difference within a year and a half was a big deal. And I could hear it on my own, but for someone else who hasn't necessarily listened to my music all the time and only look at me from like a critical lens, and for him to say it like right away, I was like, okay, cool. Like that was my benchmark. Like I've really changed. So I would say mixing wise, I've definitely improved. Um, but I do think sound wise, I feel like I'm reverting back to like with the stuff that I've been writing now, I've been reverting back to the sound of Coping. So a lot grittier sounding, I don't know if it's more lo-fi or just more dirt into it, more saturation
Hmm.
involved. Um, Something More was a great, fun song to write, especially with working with a talented guy like M Camp, who's based in LA. Um, and that was a cleaner sound. Like it definitely sounded more like what's going on with R&B right now and what's been being released the past couple of years. But I've always gravitated more towards the stuff that sounds underground and more earthy.
Hmm.
Has a little bit more dust on it. So recently, with the stuff I've been writing since I've been back in Atlanta, I've been going for that sound. So I would say I'm kind of coming full circle compared to what I've started with and what I'm doing now. It's just now I think I'm much more talented in terms of mixing than I was when I first did it.
Right. That's great to come full circle because you have a new perspective on what you've already done before.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you've been there, you've explored other things that are kind of around that, or maybe something completely different, and then you can bring it back to what you already did, and it's just gonna be way more improved.
Yeah, yeah, and also just being around other people who are super talented who are also growing. So like OSSI is really great because everyone in there has kind of seen each other in their best and worst days, and we've all grown within the past 2 years as artists, as producers, as mixing engineers.
Yeah. So
Um,
tell people what Aussie is.
yeah, so OSSI is a collective that I started with my friend Bradley Gerlin, who I met along with Mira Housey freshman year, second semester. We were in a performing arts technology class called 202. Our teacher would say like, "Hey, here's a sample. You have a week to make this work." Um, and so Bradley and I kept like you have to play your songs for each other whenever they're due. So like your entire class listened to them. And Bradley and I kept hearing each other's stuff, and we kept like really appreciating each other's work. Um, and Mira also had a really killer voice, so we could hear Mira would come through with a track that you weren't even didn't have to have lyrics on, and she would just have like a full song written. Um, so the three of us got together and we're like, hey, like I don't know about y'all, but music is something I really care about. Three of us got together and formed a little group and did a performance, and then we were like, hey, like let's keep this up and let's keep performing, but also let's start writing our own stuff. And like everyone here clearly wants to be their own thing, so let's do our own thing. Um, so that was end of freshman year is when all that happened. And throughout sophomore year, we kept getting people that were interested in like other friends in the major, other friends in the school of music, um, who wanted to be involved with us and like, wanted to be independent artists. So what we found was that our major, as great as it was, wasn't really doing a ton for people who wanted to be like artists in the industry. Um, and it's because the stuff that we're learning is great for recording and stuff, but we're not really learning that much about the industry. And we were like, hey, if we watch out for each other, we probably have a shot at this. And fast forward to now, we have like 8 different artists. We have videographers, photographers, dancers. It's a bunch of people who really want to collaborate together and make creative work, but also be like support each other in being independent artists. So I would say that OSSI is a collective of independent creators that work together. We have resources that we share with each other. Like we help distribute our own stuff. We make our own art for our cover art. We make T-shirts. We make merch. But yeah, it's like a little family of artists of different mediums that work together. So again, being around all those different artists has inspired and also helped us improve in what we want to excel at. So like Mira is a phenomenal pop vocalist and singer songwriter, and another guy in our group, Ben Roberts, he is now working as a assistant. Let's see, where is he? He's working in the recording studio as an engineer for Shifted Studios in Brooklyn. And those two are kind of a pair. Like she also produces a lot of stuff with her, but they produce together on her work. Then you have Tim, who's Lotus Hotel, who has a much more like kind of a psychedelic vibe going on, heavily inspired by Unknown Moore Orchestra and Tame Impala and that type of stuff. Um, and so being with those two, I've learned a lot about one, how to treat my vocals through Mira, but with being with Tim, I'm learning how to add like effects and like really beef up sounds and to put your stuff in a world. Like Tim is really good at using his pedal board to like he uses pedal board almost like its entire front end for a console. Like he'll just run all his stuff through it and just re-record stuff. Like he'll take his vocal stem from Ableton, pass it through his entire pedal board just to put it back into the DAW.
Oh wow.
Um, but he's super creative in his process, and so being with him and also listening to music that he loves and showing each other stuff like that, we've all kind of grown with it, even though we may not necessarily make the same style of music. Like we kind of pick from each other different techniques that we've learned. And then Bradley, talk about a guy who freshman year was really into R&B. Now he's making ambient work, and he's also been scoring short films. with another videographer friend that's in the collective named Josh Noller, who's based out in LA right now too. So just everyone's kind of grown and like kind of diverged into different paths because of who we've been surrounding ourselves with. And you have like Oren Levin, who's also a really talented singer songwriter, um, who's based in LA, that's been working on stuff, and he's much more traditional and kind of like really grassroots, just like acoustic guitar singing, but also pop vocals, like really reminiscent of like the Fray, I would say, like earlier in the day. Um, yeah, like I can ramble on and on about just the different types of people that we have in this group, but I think that's what's really great about it is this, there's so many different styles that everyone contributes that we're kind of always pulling from each other.
Yeah, that's such a good idea of forming a collective, and I didn't know how different everyone was. That's such a great resource to have. I mean, to be able to bring your stuff to people you trust who are also have totally different perspectives on how they see music or how they see art, and they can give you their honest feedback or critique, and you can help them with their stuff as well. What you said earlier, I think is so key, like such an important thing of why you guys have done this. And it's like I've heard plenty of stories from people who go to school for anything. I act, so acting is also a thing that people go get a degree for. And you can do that. You can absolutely do that. You can go and get a music degree, you can go get an acting degree, a photography degree. But at the end of the day, not all of these schools or classes are going to really teach you the ins and outs of how to navigate the industry. And they might just teach you all the technical things, and then all of a sudden you're out of college and you're like, well, what do I do with all of this knowledge that I have? And for you guys to have started a great almost like database of people who are really interested in wanting to do this to help each other out at such a young age is like so key, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely helped a ton. Like Mira researched so much about like how to make sure that when you distribute it, you're doing the right things. Like, are you registered with all the right companies? Are you pushing them to the right playlist stuff? Are you copywriting your songs? Which people don't do. People assume that passive copyright's enough. You have to actually register it with the government and pay that fee to make sure that it's actually copyright protected. Like those are things that you don't learn unless someone actually tells you you need to
Hmm.
do it.
It's such a eye-opening experience when that first happens. You're like, I gotta do all this shit. I just want to like make music.
You put in like I probably put in $200 for coping, like just registering my name, signing up with BMI, signing up, or sorry, I did ASCAP. We did BMI. Legend was the group. Signing us up with ASCAP, putting stuff in with at the time we were working with STEM, and now we're doing DistroKid. So registering with them and figuring out how much money needs to be allocated for ourselves and where is it directed to, and then you have to do IRS tax forms once you make a certain amount of money from streaming services. So it's a lot. It's definitely an investment that no one tells you about. Um, and then as you get older, I mean, as you get more involved and you realize what you're doing, you realize what gear matters, you get sucked into that too. And yeah, so it's definitely a big expense, and it's deeper than what you realize
Hmm.
initially. So I 100% agree with you that it's kind of a tricks you into it.
Yeah. I had a question for you. So regarding OSSI, how do you like? What advice would you give to somebody who is looking for a community of people to who they trust and who they work with? That was always something that I think has been hard for me, especially having moved out to LA and didn't really go to just any kind of school, so that I wasn't really surrounded in that environment. So I kind of had to focus on just the stuff I could do by myself at my home. But for anyone who's looking for a community, especially, during this weird time, what would you say is a good thing to look for? Any advice you would give?
Yeah. So if you are going to go to school, definitely take advantage of the fact that you're at school. Someone my sophomore year, he was 2 years above me, but I was working in the studio with him. He made this great point saying that college is like a 4-year long conference and you need to do as much horizontal networking as possible. And so don't look at them as like clients or potential business opportunities, but more as like there's so many really creative and talented people out there that you don't trap yourself into thinking that the 4 or 5 friends that you have now are like are enough to fulfill your experience. There's so many people out there. So me discovering Michigan's creative scene helped a ton with finding a lot of people that I wanted to surround myself with. Um, and not everyone's gonna be a right fit. Like you're gonna meet some people that they're nice when you meet them, and then you don't really vibe with them when you're in the creative process. And that's part of the trick is like figuring out what works and what doesn't. Um, but it definitely helps a ton being at college or being at a school where there are other people there that you can introduce yourselves. Now, if you're not, I think it's super important to go to local shows, whether you're in college or not. Um, being a part of the local community helps a ton with meeting people that you vibe with, because you're not you're everyone there is kind of aspiring for the same goal. Everyone wants to make it to the top and to have that recognition of making good stuff. And then it's also a good way to see who else is out there, and maybe there's a style of music you never considered before or a style of art that you never thought of making, and you see it and you witness it and it's like, oh, that's really cool, I want to be a part of that, or I want to start making stuff like that. um, Being in touch with the local scene is always going to be a huge step in the right direction for what you want to do. So like Atlanta, I don't know if you're familiar with what Controller Rise is. But Controller Rise is a kind of a lo-fi hip hop community collective that started in Atlanta. And a couple years ago, my friend Nick Becker took me out there. He's like, hey, like they're playing Attack on Titan anime, and they have some pizza. Just come through. It's gonna be a bunch of lo-fi beat junkies just playing beats while you can eat some pizza while anime is playing in the background. I'm like, all right, cool, that sounds perfect.
That sounds
And
amazing.
one, I was like, this is a vibe. I'm definitely down. Um, the guy in charge of it all is this guy named Stolen Drums, who at the time was like, starting to make a name for himself. Now he's one of the biggest lo-fi producers like in the game. Like he is recognized to the T, but it's because he had that community that he helped cultivate in a city that was pretty underground at the time, and now it's like one of the most recognized like lo-fi havens now in the city and then in the country. Like people across the country know about Control Rise because of this dude and because the community's fostered. Um, so pay attention to the small stuff because you don't know what type of attention they're getting. One, so like you might be stumbling into a scene that's on the verge of breaking out, but also like you get in touch and you can start to see like what's out there. And then you'll probably even on the sides just watching those greats, you might see someone else who's trying to start up but doesn't know how to, and you're on the same path. Now you two are working together because you're both trying to figure out how to make it work. Um, so I think paying attention to the local scene is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, you never know who you're, in the same room with. You never
Right.
know who you're going to end up working with for a long time, who's going to be like a lifelong collaborator.
Exactly. You just got to put yourself out there. And I think a lot of people, especially producers, when they're first making stuff, they're too afraid to put stuff out there. You're not going to know how people are going to receive it unless you put it out. Like a lot of it is just the mental battle you have of telling yourself whether it's good enough to be released.
Mm-hmm.
You have to release stuff, and it's probably not going to be that great initially. Like that's just the reality of it. But you need that reference. You need to know where you stand.
Yeah, that goes back to what you're saying about when you turned in Coping. I mean, no joke, that's probably that song and Drowning are my two favorites that you've put out. So it's funny you say that Coping was like, mixing wise, not as good. Even your professor said that. But it's like, just, you might have these opinions, but if you don't put it out, nobody will ever hear it. Nobody else will be able to, decide for themselves.
Right, exactly. And that's another great point too with coping. Mixing isn't everything. It's important, but like clearly doesn't determine everything. Um, so don't be too caught up in the mix either. Like obviously it needs to sound professional. It needs to sound cohesive. Like you need to be able to hear every instrument. Like there should be no masking. Um, but it doesn't have to be pristine for people to receive it. Like the only people that are really going to care about mixing are other engineers and other mastering engineers. Most people aren't that, and you have to kind of remind yourself that like a lot of times you're getting in your own head for no reason. So you're right, putting it out there, letting people decide for themselves whether they like it or not, and then paying attention to that feedback goes a long way.
Very true, man. Wow. Well, that sounds like a great transition into our final piece, which is going to be just a fast five. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You give me your honest response. We can talk about it. We cannot. It's all good. But the first one, I think I already know this because we've talked about it, but Logic or Ableton?
Both.
Both. Okay.
But for Ableton, I'm quicker at because I've spent more time in it, and I felt that workflow has worked or is really similar to what Machine taught me. Um, so that's really why I stick with Ableton. But Logic just did that whole update that pretty much copies a lot of Ableton's workflow and integrates it into Logic. And Logic is a much better audio editing tool than Ableton ever will be. And at this point, because Ableton clearly doesn't care about comping or all these other functionalities that should be in there. Um, and it and Logic is a lot easier to work with in a studio setting because it has those audio editing features. But I just like Ableton because I've grown up using it, you know.
Yeah, I always thought I wish I could be better at Ableton. Like Ableton, I think is great for really fast, just ideas, like coming up with random ideas. But Logic to me is more of like, all right, I've set up the workstation. I'm gonna actually do the edits. I'm gonna start comping and things like that. Like I don't know how to comp in Ableton, and that pisses me off.
Not in there. They have yet to add it, so I feel you. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
I don't get it. All right, second question is in the studio or playing live?
They're different feelings. Playing live with a crowd that's really receptive to what you're playing and really into it is definitely one of the better feelings you can have. But when you're in the studio and it finally clicks, that's also a really fantastic feeling. So I'll probably say studio just because like when that song finally comes together.
I agree. I think there is something about because you're creating something new. You're not usually creating a new song while you're playing live, but you do get that feedback, that immediate response, which is gratifying for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, this one might be a little bit hard, but if you could only keep one piece of studio equipment that you have, what would it be? Besides like your computer.
Probably my guitar. That's where all my chord progressions and melodies come from. It's just like noodling around a guitar.
So that's how you write most of your songs?
I would say so. Yeah, it's like piano and stuff is a sound that I've always loved, and that's probably my favorite texture to add as a piano. But I'm much quicker and much more organic with developing harmonic progressions using a guitar.
Interesting. Most people say that piano is like the best songwriting instrument.
I think it's phenomenal. It's just I'm slower at it, or I'm not as skilled in piano enough for it to not impede my creative process. Guitar, I can figure it out quick. Like I know exactly where things are gonna be.
What about Channel Orange or Blonde?
It's been a minute since I've listened to both of them, to be honest. But I would probably go with Blonde just because it felt more personal.
Yeah, man, me too. It's such a to me it's such a like a vast album, you know? Like
Yeah,
I love both and I'm not going to take anything away from anyone who says Channel Orange is better, but to me that's like hit after hit after hit and then Blonde is like this world that you'll never be done exploring.
exactly. Yeah, and that second half, especially when like when Night switches and
Mhm.
goes into that more darker place. I think Siegfried is a really beautiful song. Um, which is part of the reason why I'm choosing Blonde over it, just because Siegfried solo is phenomenal. But the second half of Nights is also really beautiful too, like
Yeah.
the reverse the snare
And they're
and
totally different halves of an album.
it's completely and it's seamless. Like the fact that I mean you've probably looked into all the production issue like things too, but like the total amount of time the album is in seconds how much time a light year is or something like that or the switch in Nights is the exact halfway point of the album.
Yeah, I did know that. That's cool.
Yeah, so it just the amount of detail that went into it is kind of like a songwriter and an artist's dream. So I think that's probably why I put it on a higher place than Orange.
I agree. Kind of like the pinnacle. It's like how do you top something like that?
Right, exactly.
All right, and this is the last question. Who do you think is the most underrated artist right now?
Oof. Probably Nick Hakim.
Nick Hakim.
That is
You've
my
told me about him.
biggest inspiration for sure. Is this guy? And he just released an album. Was it end of May, early June? Will This Make Me Good? I think is what it's called. Really, really psychedelic and experimental, but it still has his kind of acoustic R&B soul vibe to it. And there's some songs in there that are just like really stripped and bare, like all these instruments. It sounds like a '70s folk song almost. It, he's nuts. The chord progressions he makes are always stuff that I'm like aspiring to write, and he has the right amount of grit and dirt to it too. And he has all these crazy delay lines he's always adding. Um, and you can tell he's been through a lot too. So like his vocals really reflect that. there's so much soul that comes from what he's singing, so like it doesn't feel like it's fake or that it's being put on. Like you can tell he's trying to heal himself. Um, all those things add up to why I think he's underrated because he doesn't get enough attention for how beautiful the stuff he's written is.
Nice. What's the album called?
Will This Make Me Good is what's
Will
called.
This Make Me Good by Nick Hakim. I'll
Yes.
definitely be checking it out.
Thank you.
All right, man. Well, I think that's the end of our session here. But MEBO, Matthew Boutte, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. Everybody needs to go check out MEBO, check out OSSI, and I can't wait to see you when you come out to LA, man.
See you in a month. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. Have a good one, man. Good to talk to you.
And now I'm aware